Thank you, Senator Schatz. Senator McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you. What a great and sobering panel. Mr. Stoff, I'd like to start with you and talk about the CCP's IP theft and research security. I ran the Commerce Department's export controls about 20 years ago, and even then, there were warning signs of the CCP's infiltration. I remember giving a speech that talked about 90% of Chinese software being stolen or acquired mostly from the United States. Here we are 2 decades later, and that risk seems more extreme and pervasive than ever. And when it comes to the CCP theft of U.S. research and IP, where are we most vulnerable? And are research security requirements for sensitive dual-use technologies, in particular, keeping up?
Thank you for the question, Senator. First, I think we need to understand and frame the current regulatory landscape that we operate in. Where we're most vulnerable is in fundamental research domains, as defined by National Security Decision Directive 189. And basically, as you probably know, Senator, export controls largely do not apply in any case to any academic research that is designated as fundamental. And so that means that outside of a couple appropriations restrictions that have been put in place, particularly the NASA, the Wolf Amendment, there really actually isn't any restriction of any kind. And so this allows basically just a free, and this was set up by design, but this has become a much bigger problem. And I think the problem that you're raising goes beyond how we traditionally define and view IP theft, at least with the way our legal statutes are designed. Particularly 1831 and 1832 of the criminal code have very specific requirements to prove that it's theft. And most of the time, a lot of what's happening in academia, because of the open nature of our system, is not actually theft the way our statutes define it. And as such, the entire early stage of our research and innovation ecosystem is basically rife for complete penetration, influence, and diversion of all of that technology and research for China's benefit. And as was pointed earlier, I think Chairman Rich had mentioned, and when China comes in with lots of money, this is irresistible. And the combination of those two things make it very difficult for U.S. policy to affect change, because they're just simply, originally by design, enough regulatory oversight to do anything about it. Quickly, I would say that, and in my recommendations, my written testimony, I do think that we need to apply some of the restrictions in our export control regimes. The entity list, or BIS has, the OFAC lists, those are already established. The U.S. government has already determined that there are a number of entities, both research institutions and companies that conduct research, that are a threat to our national security. Well, we should put restrictions in place if you're dealing with those entities, because the government has already decided that those entities are a problem. So kind of harmonizing our export control regime with our ecosystem will help.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Along those same lines, in December, the Biden administration signed a 5-year extension of the U.S.-China Science and Technology Agreement. Was this a good idea? Is this part of the big gap in our regulatory framework that you're referring to?
To be honest, Senator, I am not familiar enough with the details of that agreement to opine on whether this is effective or not. But the sense I get is most of the policy apparatus and how universities and the government interacts with each other, grant-making agencies, et cetera, the things that I recommend, I don't think would have any bearing or effect on this larger government-to-government science technology agreement. I think all the things that I recommend would not necessarily conflict with that agreement.
Thank you. Mr. Mattis, just very quickly, we saw all the announcements this week around DeepSeek, R1. Does the proliferation of open source AI models that are trained to push the CCP's propaganda advance the party's efforts to shape public discourse in the United States? And how can this open source approach enable future influence operations?
So very quickly, I think there are two dangers of platforms like this from coming out of the PRC. The first is that it is a data collection effort, that the more people interact with these systems, the more that is brought in. And this is something that is, goes back to sort of the back-end software that are on Huawei telecommunications and conference equipment, many other areas where you can see the PRC putting things kind of astride those pipes and platforms that allow them to benefit from the flow of information. So that's the other piece. The second is that the more that those models are trained on an international set of data, the more we're able to see things like the effectiveness of automated disinformation systems and propaganda systems that we have seen the PRC use. And the better those are, the harder it is to deal with, the harder it is to recognize them, the harder it is to shut it off.
Thank you.